I have two brief questions I'd like to ask, if I may.
Welcome to Left Foot Media. My name is Brendan Malone and you're watching The Daily Question. If you've got an article or a piece of movie news or a question or a topic that you want me to explore on The Daily Question, then please email me or tweet me. The details are in the video description below. Don't forget also, if you're not following me on Twitter, you should start doing that. The way YouTube is mucking around with notifications and subscribers, you might not be finding out at the moment whenever I post a new piece of video content. So cut out the middleman, go straight to Twitter, because I use that primarily as a vehicle to let people know whenever I post a new video, so you're guaranteed to find out by following me there. Right, without any further ado, let's get into today's question of the day. Should we be comparing Solo, a Star Wars story, with The Last Jedi? The reason I'm asking that question is because I'm already seeing reviewers who are starting to do exactly that. And I would say that's not a good place to actually start. This is what I like to call Revenge of the Sith fever. What happened with the prequels, for those who remember them, was the first two movies came out, they were not good movies. The third film, Revenge of the Sith, came out, and it still wasn't a good movie, but it didn't have some of the glaring flaws that the first two films had. It still had problems, and it wasn't a good film, but some of the really annoying and frustrating things about the previous two, they were not present in that film, and so we got lulled into a bit of a false sense of security. Admit it, most of us did. And initially, we kind of started to think of this film as possibly being a good film just because it wasn't as bad as the previous films. So Revenge of the Sith fever is where you start to think that a subsequent film is a good film because you compare it to a previous film that wasn't good at all. Now, that's not a good way to review or to think about films, and I would say that this Revenge of the Sith fever isn't helpful if you're thinking about Solo. So I've thought about Solo even more overnight, and since my review yesterday, there are other things that I realised that are flawed in the writing of this film. For example, the character of Han Solo, he goes into the military at one point in the movie, and spends a substantial amount of time in the military, involved in active military conflict, and then when we see him again, because there's basically a time jump that cuts from when he goes in to when we see him next, and a lengthy period of time has elapsed, and yet Han Solo is still exactly the same character. In fact, he has not only undergone zero character development, but he is still on the exact same quest that he was when we saw him enter the military. Nothing at all has changed for him as a character, despite the passing of time and the fact that he has been engaged in a major life-changing event such as military conflict. It just doesn't really make a lot of sense. They haven't, I mean, it doesn't have to be dark or serious, but there should have been some sort of development. And by the way, that point of development could have been an interesting motivation for some of the other events that sort of transpire subsequently in the film, but it's never really exploited or explored properly as far as the storytelling goes in this film. So how do you avoid looking at a movie with the flaws that I've highlighted in my review yesterday and the one I've just mentioned now? How do you avoid looking at a film like that and falling into this trap of comparing it to something previous? How do you avoid Revenge of the Sith fever? Well, I think what you've got to do is you've got to stop and ask yourself one simple question about, in this case, we're talking about a Star Wars film, so you need to ask yourself the question, if Solo, a Star Wars story, did not take place in the Star Wars universe and it didn't involve characters that I know, and there was no nostalgia factor here, and I saw the same movie, but without the nostalgia and without the Star Wars, would I still be saying that this was a good film? Or would I be actually seeing the faults that really are present in this film because the glasses or the distorted perspective of nostalgia is suddenly lifted from my eyes, and so I'm seeing the film a lot more clearly now? I mean, if this was a movie about two guys called Chuck Solo and Dave Calrissian, and the exact same movie happened, would you still feel the same way? Or is it purely the nostalgia that is causing you to look at a film that isn't so good and say, oh, it was good, and then when you couple that with the fact that it wasn't as bad as The Last Jedi, you go, oh yeah, this was a good film. Take The Last Jedi out of the equation. Take the Star Wars and the nostalgia out of the equation, and then ask yourself again, was this film really good? And I guarantee you, you'll begin to see a few more of the flaws and the faults in this film, and if this film was branded any other way, it wasn't there was no nostalgia factor, then I'm pretty sure a lot more people would actually start to see through and start to realise, yeah, hold on a minute, this ain't such a good film. Right, that's all I want to say. The floor is now open, so please let me know your thoughts in the comments section below. And if you like the content I'm creating and you want to see more of it, then please support me on Patreon for as little as $1 a month. A huge thank you to everyone who is already doing that too, by the way. And don't forget, if you're not following me on Twitter and you want to know whenever I post a new piece of video content, cut out the middleman, go straight to Twitter and start following me there. And you will be guaranteed to know whenever I post new video content. That's right, I can hear my theme music too. That's it for me for this week. I'll see you next week on The Daily Question.